Tradition means nothing when the woman you love is slipping away. In a moment that insiders are already calling one of the most dramatic confrontations the entertainment world has seen in years, Dylan Wang has reportedly stepped far beyond the boundaries of family expectations and elite tradition. Faced with the possibility of losing Shen Yue to Miles Wei, Dylan made a decision that stunned everyone around him. Instead of remaining silent and respectful of the strict rules that have governed his family for generations, he chose open defiance. What followed was a tense encounter filled with emotion, determination, and a powerful message that some connections cannot be controlled by family power or social expectations. The evening where everything changed began quietly inside a private venue reserved for a high-profile gathering. The event itself was meant to be elegant and controlled. Influential figures from the entertainment industry and business world moved through the grand hall, while soft music echoed beneath crystal chandeliers. Among the guests were several names that immediately attracted attention. Miles Wei arrived early, calm and confident as always. His presence alone sparked whispers among those who had followed the complicated rumors surrounding him and Shen Yue. Many believed the night might finally bring clarity to their rumored connection. Shen Yue entered shortly afterward. She appeared composed, greeting familiar faces and exchanging polite smiles. Yet those who watched closely noticed that she seemed slightly distant, as if her mind was somewhere else entirely. What few people expected was the sudden arrival that followed. The doors opened again. Dylan Wang walked into the room. His presence instantly shifted the atmosphere. Conversations paused. Eyes turned toward him, because everyone inside that room knew one important detail. Dylan was not supposed to be there. According to insiders familiar with the situation, his family had strongly discouraged him from attending the event. Their expectations were clear. Maintain distance. Avoid unnecessary attention. Do not create complications that could damage the carefully maintained image of their family reputation. But Dylan had chosen to ignore those instructions. And the moment he stepped into the hall, it became obvious why. Across the room, Shen Yue stood near the balcony windows speaking with Miles Wei. For several seconds, Dylan simply watched the scene. Those closest to him later described the moment as quiet but intense. There was no hesitation in his expression. No uncertainty. Only determination. He began walking forward. Each step drew more attention. Guests slowly moved aside as he approached the balcony area where Shen Yue and Miles Wei were standing. The music continued playing softly in the background, but the tension in the room had grown impossible to ignore. Miles Wei noticed Dylan first. His expression shifted slightly. Shen Yue turned a moment later. For a brief instant no one spoke. Then Dylan finally broke the silence. His voice was calm but firm. He addressed Shen Yue directly, asking if she could speak with him privately. The request alone caused murmurs among the surrounding guests, because this was no longer just a casual conversation between colleagues. It was an open challenge unfolding in front of dozens of influential witnesses. Miles Wei stepped forward slightly as if to respond, but Dylan continued speaking. He made it clear that he had come specifically to see Shen Yue, not to debate, not to negotiate, but to make something absolutely clear. Tradition and expectations would not decide the direction of his life. The statement stunned several observers. For someone raised within such a powerful and disciplined family structure, speaking so openly against those expectations was almost unheard of. Shen Yue listened quietly. Those watching from nearby tables could see the tension in her expression. The situation had escalated far beyond what she likely anticipated when she arrived that evening. Miles Wei remained composed, though the shift in the room's energy was undeniable. Dylan then said something that many later described as the defining moment of the entire confrontation. He said that no family tradition, no reputation, and no external pressure would ever make him walk away from someone who truly mattered to him. The words echoed through the quiet balcony area. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Shen Yue slowly stepped forward. The rest of the guests could not hear the conversation that followed between them, but the intensity of the moment was unmistakable. Inside the hall, whispers began spreading rapidly. Some guests admired the courage Dylan had just displayed. Others worried about the consequences of openly challenging such powerful family expectations, because actions like this rarely happen without repercussions. Eventually, Shen Yue and Dylan left the balcony together to speak privately in another room. Miles Wei remained behind, calm but thoughtful. The event itself continued, but the mood had changed completely. What had begun as a formal gathering had turned into a story that would travel through the entertainment world by morning. News of Dylan Wang's public defiance spread quickly across fan communities and industry circles. Many praised the decision as a powerful display of loyalty and emotional courage. Others questioned whether confronting both family expectations and a public rival in such a dramatic way would create complications that could follow him for years. But one fact remained undeniable. Dylan Wang had made his position clear. For him, the rules of tradition meant far less than the possibility of losing someone important. Whether that decision will reshape the relationships between Dylan Wang, Shen Yue, and Miles Wei remains uncertain. Yet one thing is certain. On that unforgettable night inside a glittering hall filled with powerful witnesses, Dylan Wang chose conviction over caution. And in doing so, he proved that sometimes the strongest statement a person can make is simply refusing to walk away. The moment Dylan Wang stepped forward, the atmosphere in the room shifted so dramatically that people later described it as if time itself had paused. Shen Yue stood frozen near the center of the hall, her expression caught between surprise and relief. Just moments earlier the evening had been tense but controlled. Conversations whispered across marble floors and crystal lights shimmered above a gathering of powerful families and influential figures. Then Dylan arrived. Not quietly, not cautiously. He walked straight into the situation everyone had been pretending not to notice. Miles Wei was standing beside Shen Yue, calm and confident, surrounded by people who seemed to believe the night was already decided. His posture carried the quiet assurance of someone who thought the outcome had already been sealed behind closed doors and family arrangements. But Dylan Wang had never been the type to accept decisions made for him. And tonight he proved it. The first thing people noticed was his expression. It was not anger. It was something far more dangerous. Determination. Every step he took across the polished floor echoed through the hall, drawing the attention of every guest present. Conversations stopped. Glasses were lowered. Even the musicians in the corner faltered for a moment as the tension thickened. Shen Yue noticed him first. Her eyes widened slightly, disbelief crossing her face as Dylan approached. No one had expected him to come, especially not like this. Miles Wei turned slowly as Dylan stopped only a few steps away. The silence between them felt heavy, like the air before a storm breaks across the sky. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Dylan finally broke the silence. His voice was calm but carried enough force that the entire room heard every word. He said Shen Yue was not a decision that could be negotiated between families. She was not an agreement. She was not a strategy. And she certainly was not something that could be taken from him without a fight. Gasps moved quietly through the crowd. What Dylan had just done was unthinkable. By speaking openly like this, he had challenged not only Miles Wei, but also the powerful expectations of his own family who were standing only a few meters away. Across the hall, his parents exchanged sharp looks with several elders. Their expressions carried a mixture of disbelief and warning. Dylan ignored them completely. His attention never left Shen Yue. For a brief second, something softened in her expression, as if the weight she had been carrying all evening had suddenly shifted. Miles Wei, however, did not look amused. He stepped forward slightly, his tone controlled but unmistakably cold. He reminded Dylan that certain decisions had already been discussed among their families and that emotional reactions would not change those arrangements. But Dylan did not move. In fact, he stepped closer. The two men now stood face to face, the distance between them barely enough for anyone to breathe comfortably. Observers later said it felt like watching two powerful forces collide. Miles Wei represented tradition, planning, and alliances that had been carefully built over years. Dylan Wang represented something unpredictable, something personal, something that refused to follow the script everyone else expected. And that is exactly why the room had gone silent. because no one knew what would happen next. Then Dylan said something that would be repeated across social media for weeks afterward. He said if any arrangement had been made involving Shen Yue without her choice, then that arrangement meant nothing to him. The words landed like thunder. Across the hall, several elders stood up abruptly. Some guests looked away, while others leaned forward, realizing they were witnessing a moment that would soon become headline news. But the most important reaction came from Shen Yue. Until that moment, she had remained quiet. Now she finally spoke. Her voice was softer than Dylan's, but carried a clarity that cut through the tension like a blade. She said she had never asked anyone to decide her future for her. The statement shocked nearly everyone present. For the first time that evening, the narrative that had been quietly building around her seemed to collapse. Miles Wei looked at her carefully, clearly reassessing the situation. Dylan, however, did something unexpected. Instead of continuing the confrontation, he simply stepped slightly to the side and held out his hand toward Shen Yue. He did not demand anything.
He did not speak again.
He simply gave her a choice. The entire hall watched. Seconds stretched longer than anyone thought possible. Then Shen Yue made her decision. She walked forward and placed her hand in Dylan Wang's. The reaction was immediate. Whispers erupted across the room like sparks catching fire. Some guests hurried toward the exits while others pulled out their phones, knowing this moment would explode across entertainment headlines before the night was over. Dylan did not celebrate. He did not smile. Instead, he looked directly at Miles Wei one last time. The message was clear without a single word spoken. This story was not finished. But the balance of power had just changed. With Shen Yue beside him, Dylan turned and began walking toward the exit. Behind them, the carefully arranged evening had completely unraveled. Family expectations had been shattered. Alliances had been questioned. And the quiet tension between Dylan Wang and Miles Wei had transformed into something far more public and far more dangerous. Outside the hall, reporters were already gathering, sensing that something dramatic had happened inside. Flashes from cameras lit the entrance as doors opened. And as Dylan Wang and Shen Yue stepped into the night together, one truth became impossible for anyone to ignore. Dylan had just chosen love over legacy. And the consequences of that choice were only beginning.